Welcome back to the channel. This is a response to DraftPhysics. I triggered Gary by using the word magic. So I'm going to explain what I mean by magic and why is it that DraftPhysics' hypothesis is in fact magic. So what do we think of when we think of magic? So you think of like a magician and he's got a hat and somehow he reaches into the hat and he pulls out a rabbit, right? That's magic. So why is that magic? Well, for one thing, is that there's absolutely no explanation for this particular phenomenon. In fact, everything that we know about hats and rabbits say that that just cannot happen. So that's one characteristic. Another characteristic is that you have to think of it as an act of faith. Or anytime you hear someone justify something like this, pulling rabbits out of hats, as it just happens, or it's fundamental, or there are some things you just cannot explain. So whenever you hear those kinds of explanations, those are magic, okay? Now, there are certain things which might seem like magic, and sometimes you don't need to have, sometimes there are things that happen that you simply cannot explain. However, we have usually experiments to demonstrate whatever weird thing that we cannot explain. For example, say superconductivity. That's a very mysterious thing. There are some theories on how it happens, but me personally, I may not have any idea how that happens. But because we have experimental evidence which does directly say that that phenomenon happens, then I can legally use that without invoking magic. So I can invoke superconductivity, even though I am kind of acting as a, it's kind of an act of faith. I can't explain it, but if I have experimental evidence that says that that happens, then that is not magic. Okay? So, an example of magic that dissidents often do is that they will invent, say, a particle or force, or they will just, they will invent something. Okay, so this is another characteristic of magic in physics is that when you hear the invention of something just out of the blue, that is an invocation of magic because we're expected to take as a pure act of faith that is somehow fundamental, but yet have no experiments to demonstrate the existence of whatever thing they've invented. So, if you call it a circulon, an FP, a G1 particle, a G2 particle, whatever on you come up with, that is, in fact, an act of magic. So now getting specifically to the DraftPhysics hypothesis. So the first thing that they hypothesize is the existence of a force bit. Okay, so I think that's what Gary calls it, force bit. All right. Once again, we have to take this as an act of faith. It just happens. This is probably his fundamental. I hate to call it a particle because I don't think it is, but it's a thing, it's a fundamental thing. But yet we have no explanation of how that works. Why is it go at the speed of light? We have no experiments to demonstrate its independent existence, right? And so first off, this thing right here, a force bit, is in fact a bit of magic. Okay, so as long as any theory has its fundamental basis on something which has no explanation, has no experiments to demonstrate it, and must be taken as an act of faith, is in fact magical. So let's take a look at the video here directly to show you how he directly pulls a rabbit out of a hat.
An interaction. Now, if the red bit hits it, so if a red bit comes in and hits an electron, it goes right through and it comes out a green bit, okay, an electron bit. All right.
Wow, that's amazing. A red bit comes in, hits the electron, goes right through it, and becomes a green bit. Now, I don't know about you, but that's literally the definition of pulling a rabbit out of a hat, right? Because we have to take completely as an act of faith that that's what happens to red bits and electrons, right? And yeah, if you ask Gary, I believe we've discussed this before, and he has said the one thing I said you cannot say, which is that you cannot know or that it's fundamental, right? That is a pretty complicated action for a red bit to turn into a green bit. Plus, we're not even exactly sure what that green or what makes it green or what makes it red, since this is just 4 bits. So one of them's red, one of them's green. How do you know? You don't. Which makes it a bit of magic. And so once again, we have no explanation for how this conversion is done. We have absolutely no supporting corroborating experiments to demonstrate that this sort of thing can happen. I mean, really, this is a very, very strict and hard to meet criteria for it to not be magic. But for example, if his hypothesis brought things down to like the Newtonian level, right? So that all you needed was it literally explained, like, why is it when a billiard ball hits this other billiard ball, it goes, that direction, right? If you could break it down to something that we know, because even this, perhaps, how this collision works, you might not even know particularly exactly how that works, and you might say that just happens, but since we can demonstrate in experiments that this sort of thing happens, then you can reliably use that as a basis for your theory. But as a basis for your theory, you cannot just say red bits turn into green bits, right? That is literal magic. That is pulling rabbit out of hat. And that is why I continue to assert that much of what Gary's hypothesis is based on these 6 rules, but each one of these 6 rules, unfortunately, violate all these criteria for magic, and that they're all magic. So, sorry, Gary, but that's the way I see it, and I'm sure you'll have a reply for me soon. Thank you.